The top three most popular parrots in the US are budgies, lovebirds, and cockatiels. So today I have a very special guest here who specializes in cockatiels. Please welcome the owner of Birds by Us, Shawn.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Shawn, thanks for being here. Now, I know we met quite recently, and when we spoke, I was really impressed. And I wasn't just impressed with your age, I was impressed with your knowledge, your experience, and your dedication to the craft of aviculture.
Thank you.
So please tell the audience about yourself and tell us about your experience with birds.
Hi guys, my name is Shawn. I'm 18 years old. I have been in aviculture for most of my life, but professionally I've been doing this now for about 4 years. And I started from canaries and I have worked my way up to cockatiels. I breed them full time. And yeah.
Got it. Yeah, for sure. And I'm just curious though, why did you decide to specialize in cockatiels out of 350 different parrot species? What was the reason?
Um I don't know. I just like the species itself, number one. I the story history of Birds by Us originally started during the peak of COVID. My
Okay.
father, I had bought a couple canaries as pets, and when I had to get rid of them, I saw someone that had a cockatiel for sale. And when I went to go purchase the cockatiel, in my head, I thought it was a cockatoo, large
Okay.
pair. When I went there, I had seen it was a little cockatiel, and I'm telling the guy, I'm like, this is not what you had listed. This is not the bird that I came for. I originally came for a cockatoo. And he's like, no, 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 no. You came for a cockatiel. So we ended up buying it. And to this day, I love them. I believe cockatiels as a whole, they make phenomenal first time pets. They are low maintenance and overall a very good species to start off with. They're very budget friendly. Um, overall, hands down, a phenomenal species to work with. They can talk, they can do almost everything your large parrot can do. So
For
that is why
sure.
I'm cockatiel.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. When I think about the cockatiel, I really think about the perfect bird for a beginner and an intermediate bird keeper. I mean, they're not as demanding as the larger birds and not as high strung. And in my opinion, they make perfect pets. But from what I understand, you deal with many different color varieties of the cockatiel, different mutations. So just let us know what mutations do you work with currently?
So there are several different mutations that I have worked with and several different mutations that I'm working on at the moment that I haven't even got my hands on myself. And I used to work with them in the past, but as time goes on, sometimes certain pairs are not doing as good as other pairs, and you have to let go of them, unfortunately. So the mutations that I'm working on at the moment are the white face mutation,
Hmm.
pies. We have the pearls and the regular grays. I try to stick with a lot of the at least one dark color in the pair because the darker the color, the stronger the gene. There are more
Right.
brown colored human beings or brown colored eyes human beings compared to like blue colored eyes. So
Right.
if you have, for instance, if you have two Lutinos or two albinos, there's a saying that a lot of the babies will come unhealthy because the
Hmm.
genes are very weak. So that means the bird or the babies can come with certain issues or a bald spot on its head, or
Right.
um, there might be issues somewhere down the line. Now, am I saying every single baby that a Lutino and a Lutino pairs or produces is going to come sick or has uh, genetic or defects? No,
Hmm.
but
Right.
there's a very high chance. So a lot of breeders will tell you no, it's not a good idea.
Definitely. I mean, that makes perfect sense, and I'm glad you said that because, just like you mentioned, when breeders are looking to establish these newer mutations, like 20 years ago when the Lutina was fairly new, it did take a bit of inbreeding or line breeding to establish the mutation, and then it's up to breeders like you and others to breed back to the wild type and really get some size and vigor back into the bird. So I think that's phenomenal. Now, when you're personally looking to add new bloodlines, where do you go and what do you look for in a breeder?
So I'm very picky when it comes with which breeders I work with. There's about three
Hmm.
different breeders that can say that they supply Birds by Us or
Hmm.
Shawn as a whole. I'm very, very picky. The reason why I'm very picky is because we're probably going to talk about it later, but disease is very, very important when you're talking about cockatiels.
Mhm.
Nowadays, so many different breeders are throwing so many different birds in so many different directions, and people don't know what the heck they're doing. Especially the new aviculturists, where they don't know what they're doing or they don't understand how to buy the right bird.
Right.
These people will sell you a bird that has issues, and you end up having problems. And I myself, I'm going to be honest, I had that problem in the beginning. Not really with sick birds, but it was more, there's this thing called mites. Some people might be aware of it. Some might not, but mites is these little bugs. They're very, very small.
Mhm.
And birds produce it sometimes, and canaries are known for. So when I had canaries, I remember my canaries had mites. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm gonna be honest,
Right.
and I had to get rid of my birds. There was a guy, I believe in New York or somewhere over there, that had a pet store, and he was like, "I'll take him." I ended up losing a lot of money, but I had to get
Right.
rid of the birds and start from zero. So from there on, I learned my lesson of, hey, be careful with who you buy from,
Yeah.
and make sure you do your thorough research on who you're buying from and what their birds are. But that's for making sure you buy it from the right person. Now, as for the breeder, or as for the breeding pair or the bird
Mhm.
itself, I definitely look for the size.
Okay.
I try to look for the nice big cockatiels. When I say size, I'm not saying fat, because you don't want an overweight bird, because the more
Exactly.
overweight it is, the harder time it's going to have producing. But also, you don't want to look for a skinny bird where it's the bone is sticking out, or
Right.
that type of stuff is no bueno. So you have to make sure the bird is nice in size, nice big posture,
Mhm.
um, nice long crest. But overall, some birds that I have in there are regular sized cockatiels you'll find at an
Mhm.
average pet store, but they have a strong genetic background. So that's what I also try to look for as well, a strong bloodline where it tracks back years and years and years before, and I know where the bird came from, who the
Right.
grandparents are, and I know what color mutations the birds will produce. So
Got
I
it.
hope I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also just curious. I know you have a ton of experience with cockatiels. Are they prone to any health issues? Have you seen anything in your years of working with them?
So yes, cockatiels are known for that. I actually made a post on my Facebook account
Okay.
speaking about that. A lot of breeders stay away from cockatiels and also
Mhm.
Indian ringnecks for that particular reason.
Mhm.
Borna and polyoma is a very, very, very big disease when it comes to these guys, because
Right.
they produce a lot of dander and a lot of dust, especially the cockatiels, and they once they have that disease, it just spreads like wildfire. With the
Oh yeah.
ringnecks, I'm not going to talk BS. I'm not really sure how it spreads with those guys, but I know with these guys, with cockatiels, they're known for that,
Got
where
it. Okay.
they are, let's say, a certain pair has it and they produce babies, or they're in a room with other cockatiels, or they're in contact and it just spreads. It'll go from there. So a lot of people don't want to work with this particular species, because
Mhm.
they know if I add this on and I quote unquote risk this species in my aviary and it passes on to my macaws, grays, cockatoos,
Yeah.
Amazons, and next thing you know, your entire aviary is flooded. So you got to be very careful. And sometimes people don't want to risk um, that big of a risk for something that's not worth that much money. A
Right.
cockatiel, we sell them here for 325. Compared to like a macaw or an African gray, you might get for 4,000, 4,500, more or less, give or take. But it's not worth. Some people may say it's not worth the risk to disease test every single bird, and then you add it
Right.
on, and some people don't want to do that. So that's why I chose this species, because not a lot of people do it, and a lot of
Yeah.
people don't respect the species, and they don't want to put their hands or get their hands dirty. So I was like, I'll be the one to step up on the plate.
For sure, someone's got to do it, and I have a ton of respect for you in that aspect because, like you said, there's a lot of people breeding cockatiels, but are they doing it necessarily the right way? Not too many of them. Not too many are doing the quarantine, the disease
Sure,
testing. Not too many are being picky with their bloodlines like you when you're looking for that size and
sure.
vigor in the bird.
And one thing I am gonna say, to make myself not look like the perfect aviculturist,
Got it.
by no means am I perfect. If you come to my aviary, I think I have a very good setup. But
Mhm.
by me saying that, I don't mean my entire aviary's what is it called? A closed aviary, or I'm disease testing every single one of my birds. I don't mean that. Um, what I'm saying is, am I picky with where I get my birds from? 100%. But if I told you every single one of my birds are disease tested and,
Right.
I'd be lying because it's not like that. But, where I buy from, I'm very picky.
Absolutely, and I agree with you. I mean, we're definitely not perfect, but we just remain students. I learn something new every day, and I can learn something new from anyone. On our first phone call, I learned a ton as well. So yeah, it just all comes down to just continuous learning. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you feed your birds and what your philosophy is on diet.
So my diet is very basic, I would say, or at least
Okay.
in my books. I work with this company called Abaseed.
Hmm.
For those of you that are new to aviculture or looking for a place to shop, I would 100% recommend them. They have the best supplies in town. They also ship. Mike from Abba, shout out to him. I would recommend his stuff. I personally, for my cockatiels, I use the Abba 1200. There is no sunflower seeds in there. A lot of stuff is natural, so I recommend that for my birds. I feed my birds once a day, every morning. And as far as besides the food itself goes, the Abba 1200, I also give my birds chop. And sometimes, besides chop, I also give like separate stuff as well. So just broccoli or just cauliflower or just kale, like just individual ingredients. For some people that may not know what chop is just a mixture of several different fruits and vegetables. So um, let's say I have kale, cauliflower, corn, papaya, what else? So many different things. You can put berries in there. You
Hmm.
mix it all up in one and you serve it to your birds. Now, when I said um, fruits and vegetables, be very, very careful with how much sugar you have in your bird's diet. This is
Hmm.
for breeders and this is also for pet owners because you have to understand these birds are inside of a cage. They're not out in the wild where they can fly for hours on end and burn off the fat. So you have to be very, very careful with what diet you give them. And some species like the Amazons, the Eclectus, they have to have a much more careful diet compared to, like, let's say an African gray or a macaw. So you got to be
Right.
very careful and do your research because a lot of times um, the pet stores, and I'm not pointing fingers at any particular store, just speaking as a community as a whole. You have to understand these pet shops are a business and they will try to maximize their profits as much as they can. So what will happen is these people will recommend the most top dollar brand or most expensive thing for your bird, and 99% of the stuff in there is not even healthy for your bird. So you're going in
Hmm.
there buying this stuff and you're like, what the heck? My bird is dropping dead. And it's not that it's your fault, but you should have done the homework and the research before buying that stuff. And a lot of these pet stores don't give you the knowledge you need to purchase this bird. And they don't tell you, hey, listen, this thing is like they say a 3-year-old child that's running like a
Right.
maniac that'll drive you crazy. They don't say none of that. They just say, hey, listen, you're interested? Okay, this is your bird. This is my money.
Hmm.
Very well. But it doesn't work like that. You have to understand that these birds need a lot of time, a lot of attention. A cockatiel itself has a lifespan of about 25 to 35 years. That's very normal. I'm not talking about high end, even bigger than that, just saying average.
Right.
And to understand that, it's not like something like a child buys a toy or gets a toy from his parent and after a day or two he's like, oh, I'm bored. No, 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 it doesn't work like that. You buy this thing because it's a long-term commitment. Same thing with a conure, a macaw, a cockatiel.
Yeah.
Those are even more difficult than a cockatiel. So I would 100% recommend for anybody that's interested in a bird, whether it's from Birds by Us or Mark's Parrots or anybody in town, 110%, don't listen to anyone. Do your homework first. And once you say, hey, Shawn, hey, Mark, I'm ready,
Right.
go ahead and buy it. But don't just say, oh, this bird is colorful. Or the
Right.
biggest thing I hear from people nowadays, or a misconception is, hey, Shawn, you have birds, correct? I do. How may I help you? Do you happen to have birds that talk? Right when they say that, it's not that I become disrespectful, but I already know this person does not know what they're talking about. So I treat them as a beginner because how do I say it now? You cannot call in and say, hey, do you have a bird that talks? 90% of birds can talk if you train them. Maybe not 90%, but most birds at a pet store can talk.
Mhm.
A parakeet you can buy at PetSmart can talk. I've
Right.
seen it myself talk. But is it much harder? Probably. But if you spend the time and effort to make that bird talk, I promise you that bird can talk. It's just a matter of time and a matter of patience. So, that being said, definitely do your homework, guys, because this is
Mhm.
not something where you purchase and tomorrow you end up bringing it back to a pet store, or give it up to a rescue or a shelter and
Right.
say, sayonara, I'm done. No, no, this bird has feelings. This bird needs time and attention like another human being. So definitely do your homework.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's a great thing to say, for people to do their homework, do their research, but where do you think is the best place to go when looking for information about cockatiels? Because I know if you meet 100 different breeders, you'll get 100 different opinions.
Yes.
So
And I'm
what
glad
are
you
your
said
thoughts
that.
on that? Yeah,
I'm going to say something that you said real quick and then I'll answer your question. Are you
sure.
okay? Okay.
Of course, of
You
course.
said you might ask a breeder 100 different things and you will get 100 different answers. I appreciate you for saying that because there is never a correct answer, you know?
Mhm.
Let me give you an example. It's like saying, "Hey Shawn, if I buy this cockatiel from Birds by Us and I buy a cockatiel from Mark's Parrots, is it guaranteed they're going to get along? No, it's not
Right.
guaranteed. It's all up to the bird's personalities, the bird's age, the size of the cage. There's so many different factors that play a role. So I appreciate you for saying that because
Of course.
something that might work for you might not work for me. Same
Exactly.
thing with breeding. A setup that might work for you or a diet that might work for Mark's Parrots will not work for Birds by Us because every
Right.
bird is different. Your bird room is not the same as mine. You don't put the same amount of lighting as I do. You know what I mean? So there's so many different things. So just because a breeder or a veterinarian is telling you, hey, do this, that does not mean you should run head first and listen to them. No,
Exactly.
see how your bird is itself first. And then from there, go with that route because just because this worked for me, that does not mean it's going to work for you. So just because
Right.
something might work for my aviary or my birds are producing so much because something that I do, that does not mean if you implement it, it's also going to work for you as well. So
Exactly.
definitely do your research and research your birds. You can tell so many different things when you are reading the body language of your birds.
Right.
For instance, if you're looking inside of your bird's food bowl, if you see that they're picking out a certain food and then at the end of the day when you're changing the food the next day you see that they're not eating that particular thing, that means your bird does not like that. So
Exactly.
based just off of that you can understand. Another thing, there's a big problem even to this day, birds plucking. Your
Right.
bird is not plucking for no reason. There's a reason for that. Why is the bird plucking? Is it the setup that I have? Is it the diet that I have? Is it the amount of time that I'm spending with my bird? If you're spending, let's say you purchase your bird today, and for the next 2 weeks, you're spending 5, 6 hours a day with the bird because you're excited. Then
Right.
after 2 weeks, you start spending 1 hour a day with the bird. The bird is like, what the heck? Why is Mark not spending time with me? What did I do wrong? So then the
Exactly.
bird is getting stressed. Next thing you know, it's plucking. Whose fault is that? Not the birds. So,
It's true.
there's a lot of stuff. We can sit here and talk for hours and hours, but definitely do your homework and research because it's very important. But as
Yeah.
far as where can you find this information, um, the first person would 100% be the person you're buying from. So if the person that you're buying from is being hesitant when answering questions or not being rude, but like pushing the sale, they're
Right.
not the one for you. If you're purchasing something that is quality, you also want quality like customer service or
Sure.
care from your person as well. So if you call Mark's Parrots or Birds by Us, if you call them and say, "Hey, listen, I have a question. How does this work or what does this mean?" Bother the breeder, bother
Yeah.
them and ask them this. Drive them crazy. Say, "Hey, how does this work? How does that work?" Because that's the professional that went through those trials and errors and knows the problems to your solutions to your problem. So definitely do your due diligence and ask them the questions. And once you understand how this works, then go from there. Another one, We have social media nowadays. Google, that's the biggest answer to everything. But one thing I will say, not everything you find on social media is the answer to your problem. Just
Hmm.
because it says that, that does not mean right away, oh, Wikipedia, that's the answer. No, do your research. First, see if which source says this or that. If it's a viable source, then it's the one. Another big one on Facebook.
Hmm.
There are so many Facebook pages out there that you can join in your area or even worldwide with people that have had problems with their birds. They'll post, and there are other people that have experience, like myself or Mark, or even people that might be bigger or more experienced than us that will go and
Hmm.
answer their questions. And next thing you know, they're saving you so much money because you don't have to go to a veterinarian or go to here or there to solve your problem. Next thing you know, you solved it yourself with a couple things at home or home remedies that can fix it. So, those are a couple that you can do, or even YouTube. There are so many people out there that are YouTubers that are aviculturists that have a lot of knowledgeable advice that they will share with the general public.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely appreciate that. Two solid points you made there. Just when it comes to when you're buying the bird, the biggest resource you have is your breeder. I mean, what I like to say is you're not just buying a bird, you're also looking for a breeder. You're shopping the breeder as well. So when you buy a bird, you're buying the bird and the breeder. You want
It's the
someone that's going
same
to
thing
have
like
the
when you
knowledge
look
for
at
you.
a review. So when you're
Yeah.
buying something online, you look at the reviews, you read the description, what's going on? That is your breeder. So when you look somewhere, the reviews is the breeder. Who is the
Right.
breeder? How long have they been in business? Excuse me. Um, what are people's thoughts on them? That type of stuff tells you all you need to know about the breeder itself. If the breeder has phenomenal reviews, they have people that say, "Hey, I recommend him. This kid knows what he's doing, or he
Right.
knows what he's doing, or they know what they're doing," then I would go with that person. But if you see there's not much good stuff said about this person, not even with birds, but with anything, then it's probably a telltale sign that they're not the one.
Absolutely. Totally. And reputation is everything, like we talked about a few days ago. And if you meet a breeder and you're questionable, you have questions about them, ask someone else, ask other breeders. What do you think
A
about
lot
Shawn
of
by Birds
breeders
by
do.
Us?
A lot of breeders do reference checks. A reference check
Hmm.
is when someone asks, "Hey, I'm looking to do business with Mark." Most of the
Hmm.
time, it happens on Facebook, where Shawn from Birds by Us, will say, "Hey, I'm looking to buy so and so bird or so and so pair or so and so species from Mark at Mark's
Right.
Parrots. What do you guys think about this person?" So that's how breeders work with each other. That's their form of reviews. For
Exactly.
customers, they most of the time check the reviews online. So they check your online, check your website, check this, check that, your Instagram, whatever platform you have, they'll check it out,
Hmm.
see who is this person. And if you have a good history or a background, the chances of them purchasing from you is much higher.
Absolutely. It's a very small world that we operate in, and reputation is everything. But I'd love to dig a bit deeper just into the cage recommendations for a pet cockatiel. So, if someone's looking to buy one pet cockatiel from Birds by Us, what size cage would you recommend?
So that is a question where there is not an exact answer for that.
Hmm.
A cage can never be too. Sorry, a cage can never. There can never be like an exact size. If I'm getting straight to the answer, because there can be cages that are bigger, there can be cages that are smaller. Of course, if we're being realistic, there are cages that can be tiny for a cockatiel, or they're really really small. But what people say is if the bird can comfortably fly around in the cage, that's a telltale sign that it's okay. But if the bird is cramped up, huddled up in the corner, then it's probably a sign that, hey, this is not something that I should be using permanently for my bird.
For sure. And you apply the same logic to breeding as well. So for like a breeding
Yes,
pair, same exact logic, right?
yes. So
Hmm.
as far as breeding, it's a little different.
Hmm.
You want to give them as much space as possible. But what I also tell people is also don't give them a cage that's too big or the bars are too wide where the bird feels like it's drowning in the cage. So, say for example, you have a walk in aviary for one cockatiel, it's way too big for the bird, you know?
Hmm.
But also, if you have a little parakeet cage where it's tiny, or let's say for a canary or like a finch, that's also too small for the bird. So I don't really have an exact like measurement that I would give, But when the bird is in there, I would also always say if the bird can fly around in there or spread its wings out with no problem, then that is probably okay for your bird.
Got it. Okay, appreciate you answering that one. Now, I do have to ask here. So, how many breeding pairs do you have in total?
So I would not be able to answer that question
Hmm.
because it's like saying like how much money do you have in the bank or like
That is true.
so
That is true.
I would not be feel comfortable answering that. But I specialize in cockatiel, so that's the only thing that I do. Now, do I have probably one pair of every single color mutation of cockatiel? Yes, I
Hmm.
do. So I hope that answers your question. But one
Oh, absolutely.
particular mutation that I do really want to get into is the white face emeralds. Even emeralds in general, emeralds are a very rare and hard mutation to come across for the
Hmm.
cockatiels. It's like, for example, like a violet color mutation for a conure. Those are very
Hmm.
uncommon. So at one point, I had about 5 or 6 pairs of them. This was when I was back in high school, and when I went back to school, after the summer, I had to get rid of my pairs, but now that I'm out of school and I have more free time, I'm getting back into it. But that's a mutation that I want to start working with somewhere in the down the line.
Very cool. Definitely. And I totally get it. I mean, us in the bird world, we are typically very private individuals, and
Yes.
you don't want to disclose everything, especially with the way you see some breeders in Florida experiencing robberies and things of that sort. So,
Yeah,
definitely good to
I
stay
do know
private.
a lot of people
Hmm.
that have gotten robbed. I have some people down in Florida that own pet stores that I'm friends with. I've heard very crazy stories where, nowadays in this generation, you don't know who's your friend and who's your enemy. Believe it or not, your enemies are the ones that are closer to you than your actual friends. You don't know what they're plotting. You don't know their belief. You don't know what's going on the inside. So
Right.
sharing that kind of information, you have to be very careful with because even now a lot of breeders don't allow people, even in the past, but now it's way more strict than before. Your average breeder in Florida or in those states will not allow somebody to come to their house.
It's true.
It's not possible. One is for health reasons, and two is for safety. You have family at home, you have kids at home, you don't know what this person that's coming in's intention is, and you don't know
Right.
what they're trying to do. I feel bad for customers because they want to see the bird, they want to see the pair, they want to experience it, but those bad guys are the ones that have to ruin it for everyone. And
Right.
now these people can't see it. But there are ethical breeders out there that will send videos beforehand. They will even do a live chat with the client and show them the bird and show everything. And once everything is done, then they meet up, they do the bird. Luckily here, I allow people to come see the bird. They see the pair. They understand what's going on here before they purchase their bird. But a lot
Right.
of people are not like that. Somewhere down the line, though, when Birds by Us does expand and get bigger, it will be very private. It will no longer be people coming in seeing the pairs because, you know, as much as you want to be nice and professional, you also have to make sure your back is protected as well. You don't
For
want
sure.
a very not I wouldn't say stupid. I don't want to use that kind of language, but a
Hmm.
very how do you say it? Like a bad decision to affect
Sure.
you in the long run. Someone comes in, steals 20, 30 pairs, and next thing you know, you're like, what the heck? Like, where's my birds? And that was
Exactly.
you just being nice. So that's with anything in the world. You got to be very careful when you're helping people out because those people you're helping out may be the ones that are actually, you know, preying on your downfall.
Absolutely right. And I totally get it. Totally for sure. One thing I did want to ask you is, okay, we don't want to get into numbers here, but let's say you're not a small breeder. Would you consider yourself a small breeder, or what do you
Um,
consider yourself?
I would say small to medium size. Medium
Okay.
size would be the one.
Okay. So considering you're small to medium size, I just want to really understand how you manage your time with your flock. Do you have
Sure.
any tips that you can share just about how to manage multiple
So
birds at
yes,
once?
that's a very, very good question. I spend a lot of time in my aviary since I do this full time, where I focus a lot on my birds.
Hmm.
I am in there most of the day. Most of the day is just me cleaning the place up, like every couple hours. It's a habit, very good one actually. I always go in there,
Hmm.
sweep up, clean. I don't use a vacuum because I don't want to scare my birds. I have a hand broom. I have to broom up the whole place. And just spending time with the birds.
Hmm.
Once the pairs are comfortable with you as the person, not only are they going to produce better for you, but they're also going to be much more satisfied pairs. When I say that, I
Hmm.
mean, the comfortable the pair, the more they're going to produce, but also the longer they're going to last. The more stressed the pair is, the less they're going to produce, and the more terrified they're going to be of you. If
Right.
you walk in your bird room and your birds are flying all over the place and they're terrified of you, that is a sign that you might want to look into things more or change things around. But that's no good. But
For
also,
sure.
you
Hmm.
have to make sure when you're in there, you're not, how do I say it? You're spending time, but not too much time. What I see
Hmm.
nowadays is people are checking the box a lot of the time. They're going, seeing the pair, doing this. Sometimes you got to let them be. What
Right.
I tell people is when you guys purchase a bird from us, first 3 days, the term I use, I've never heard someone say it, but it's my little slang. Act
Okay.
like the bird is invisible. When I say that, I mean food and water and let the bird be.
Hmm.
Us compared to the size of a cockatiel is like a monster and an ant.
Right.
So I tell people, let the bird be, give it food and water, and don't distract the bird, don't bother it, let it be. The bird itself, especially when buying it from us, it's a baby bird just weaned off. Let the bird be, let it acclimate to the house. And once he feels that this monster is not so bad after all, then
Hmm.
once you want to start working with him, so go for it. But if you bring it home today and you start grabbing him and playing with him, maybe you might get a good time out of that, or maybe it might work. But for your average baby, he's going to be terrified. He's like, where's my family? Where's my friends?
Right.
Where's everyone? And this monster is grabbing me, playing with me. It's going to make an unpleasant situation for the bird, but also it's going to make you unsatisfied because you're like, why is he not playing with me? Why is this? Why is that?
Right.
Oh, the breeder lied to me. Why is it not friendly? It's nobody's fault. You just have to give the bird
Hmm.
time. You cannot expect a bird to come home today and right away start playing with you. That is not
Right.
something that I would recommend, or I don't think that's a good decision. Let the bird be, let it acclimate, and when the time comes, go for it. Be very slow. So that's something that I always recommend. Another thing that I'm gonna go a little in depth about. I'm sorry, you didn't ask.
Sure.
I want to say this for
Go,
people that are
go
all.
right in. Hmm.
When you bring a bird home, how do I say this? It's like meeting another human. If you meet a stranger outside, you're not going to trust that person as much as you do with your spouse, your siblings, or your family members. You don't know them. You don't know their intentions. You don't know who this person is. Same thing with the relationship with you and the animal. It does not know you yet. As much as if it was hand fed or not, it does not know you. So
Right.
whether it's friendly or not, just let it be. Give it some time to relax. I've had customers that have came here before and they might take the bird home. They listen to my advice. They go home and they're like, Shawn, we brought the bird home, but it's not as friendly as you said it is. Like it's
Mhm.
we're playing with it. And I'm like, hey, you did the complete opposite of what I told you not to do.
Right.
Just take it home
Yeah.
today. It's not possible. So you have to give it some time, relax. And after the bird is cooled down a little bit, you're more than welcome to go and proceed with the training process. But yeah,
Got it. Oh, I appreciate that. It's definitely the people need to know that because a lot of people are so eager and they don't really have the patience to just
especially
let the
when
bird
they have kids.
adjust.
When they have kids in the household, the kids are very excited, and I don't blame them. I was a kid at one point, and I'm still a
Mhm.
kid.
Right.
But you know, you have to understand as parents sometimes, hey guys, for the first couple days, let's not touch the cage. Let's not
Mhm.
grab the bird. Let him be. Let the bird do its thing. If it wants to come out of the cage, leave the door open. If you want to go that route, let the door open. Of course, with your supervision, you watching the bird, but watch, see how his body language is, see how the bird reacts. If he comes out right away, he might feel comfortable with you. So it makes the training process easier. But if the bird is in the corner, he doesn't feel comfortable, and you are grabbing him or forcing him out, you are just signing that bird up and your experience up for failure because it's just not going to work like that.
Definitely. And I totally agree. I think that's great advice. So I did want to dig a bit deeper in your process for raising these baby birds. So when are you pulling the babies from the nest box? What is your hand feeding process like? What does that all look like for you?
So as I said, I went through try. There's two different terms. One is called
Mm-hmm.
hand-fed, and one is called
Mm-hmm.
parent-fed. Hand-fed is when it's raised by human beings. It's hand-fed with a syringe or hand-fed with a spoon. I myself hand feed. Excuse me. When the bird comes out of the sorry, let's start even before that.
Mm-hmm.
It takes 21 days for the egg to hatch. Some might take longer, some might take sooner. What happens is every egg hatches almost every other day. So let's say one egg hatches today, the other one might hatch the day after, so 2 days later.
Mm-hmm.
Once those babies are hatched, the mother will feed the babies if it's a good mother. Some mothers will not, and you have to every day feed from when it's hatched. But for the ones that are not, or for the ones that are good parents, you let them feed the babies up until 3 weeks. After the babies are 3 weeks, you take them out and you start hand feeding. You start hand feeding at 3 weeks at 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and night. Some breeders have a different schedule. I start hand feeding my babies 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. Some might do a little later, some might do a little earlier based on their schedule. Once the baby hits about 5, 6 weeks old, I go down to 2 weeks, 2 times a day, morning and evening time, nightish. Once the bird hits about 7 weeks, pushing 8 weeks is once a day. And that's when I start putting millet in the equation, where I put millet, the birds start feeding on the millet, and then they slowly start to take a step back and they say, you know what? I don't need that formula anymore. That's when you know that the bird is weaned off.
Got it. Okay. And what hand feeding formula do you use for your baby birds?
So I use KT high fat hand feeding formula.
Mm-hmm.
Right now there's a shortage for that, so some people might have a hard time, or even if you do get your hands on it, it is a little pricey. So you are going to have to pay a premium on it. So a lot of breeders are struggling with that. So when you do reach out to a breeder to buy a bird, never be cheap, because these people, and Mark, you understand this the same way I do, it is not easy to raise a bird. The amount of time you spend, the amount of hand feeding, it's not like the bird comes out of the egg and it weans off. The breeder has to spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of attention on those birds to make sure it raises up to be one day a quality bird. So I would 100% recommend, when you do reach out, if it's a quality breeder, don't try to haggle with them. Don't try to negotiate with them, because 99% of the time that person probably spent a lot of time, and you negotiating over 30, 40 bucks that satisfied your day might give that person a hard time, because they are working like a dog to raise those babies. So if you're buying from a pet shop, maybe that's a different situation. But even when you go to a pet store, you don't negotiate with the store owner or the employee. You go and buy. So what makes you think you're going to go and negotiate with the breeder, the person that's supplying the pet stores? So be a little understanding. And if the price is right, don't negotiate. Just say, okay, thank you so much, this is the money, and thank you so much for my baby bird.
Definitely. And that's solid advice there. Now, you've been breeding for a little while now, so I'm just curious. There's a ton of people that might say, hey, Shawn, I think I can breed cockatiels. I want to buy a pair from you and get started. What advice do you have for someone looking to actually enter the hobby?
Okay. This one will be a long answer. So
for sure.
I actually, obviously I have a passion for it. So I love what I do. If anyone's ever interested in breeding cockatiels or getting into it, feel free to call me anytime. I am very open with helping people out. When starting off, I would be very careful, like I said earlier, with where I get my birds from. I would rather pay a little more and get a quality pair than pay cheap and get a cheap pair, because this pair is going to be producing your babies. If you are getting a cheap pair that's cheap quality, they're going to give you cheap quality babies. If you get a pair that is quality, that do come from a quality bloodline or a pair, then you will get quality babies, or you have the chance of getting nice babies, because both of the parents come from a good background. So that's number one. the source of where you're getting your birds. Number 2 is your diet. Be very careful with what you're feeding your birds. With cockatiels, it's not too big of an issue because they are not as hard to maintain as, like, for instance, a macaw or African gray or a larger exotic parrot. So with them, you don't really have to have like a particular specific diet. They're very easy to breed. So definitely give them the right diet, but you don't have to be particularly, shoving exact things down their throat. You don't have to do that. That's number 2 or number 3. And then we have nest box. That is another very important thing. Be very careful with how you have your nest box set up, and be very careful with the sizing of the box, because sometimes the box is so small, the pair doesn't feel comfortable and it feels cramped up where they don't produce. And other times, the hole of the box, the sizing of the hole. And yeah, that's my advice. One more thing I'm going to say, which is very important. This goes for cockatiels. This goes for doves. This goes for canaries. This goes for macaws, grays, cockatoos, every species of bird you can think of. There is a term that people or breeders use that a lot of newbies or a lot of newer aviculturists fall for, or they get hooked onto. This term is called proven breeding pair. I don't know if you've gotten caught up with that, but I myself,
in the early days, for sure.
And this term, proven breeding pair, means this pair has proven bred for Mark, and Mark is selling his pair. So now let's take a step back. If this pair is so good, and if this pair is so proven, why would Mark sell it?
Exactly.
Yeah. So the only reasoning for that is if the person is elderly and they're getting out of the hobby, they're done. Or if there's an emergency where they're getting rid of all their birds, or they just don't specialize in that species anymore. But if that person is still in the business and they're breeding and they have several of those pairs, and they're just so happens that this so good proven pair is being sold, I would run if I heard proven pair, especially if you don't know the person or you don't know if they're good or not. Because why would someone want to sell something that is so good and so profitable? It just does not make sense. You don't have to be Albert Einstein to understand that. It's basic logic. It's just not happening. I would recommend, when you are pairing up a breeding pair of cockatiels or anything, I would recommend get 2 young babies. You are going to wait a couple months. They start breeding at about a year old. But at least your 2 birds are clean. They have never had babies, and you know where your birds are coming from, and you know the age of those birds. A lot of times people will lie and say, hey, it's a 2-year-old pair, and it happens to be a 10-year-old pair. So I would start off with a young pair with cockatiels. You only wait a couple months. It's not like a macaw where you have to wait a couple of years. So I would be patient and wait it out. Another thing, the way I pair up my birds is very different from everyone else. Some people might do this method. Some people might not. I've heard of 2 or 3 different people that have done it. And maybe it is used with other people, but I myself, use it on a regular basis when I'm pairing up pairs. What I do is I take a big flight cage and I put multiple females inside of the cage. Then you take 1 male or 2 males and you put those males inside of the flight cage. What happens is you have many options for those males. Those 1, 2 couple males you have, with all those females, will pick their pair. What happens is once they pick their pair, they bonded to each other. So it's not like an arranged marriage where you're forcing him to breed with her. He chose her and she chose him. So the chances of that pair being proven and good is very high compared to you forcing a male and female to produce with each other. So that's my little hack or secret recipe that I use for my breeding, and it works perfect for me. I've also recommended it to a lot of different people, and it also works for them. So definitely give it a shot. If any of you guys are having trouble breeding, make sure, though, you have more females than males, because what happens is the males get very dominant and are looking for their mates, that they start fighting with other males. And last thing you want is for your males to start hurting each other or fighting. So make sure the ratio is more females than males.
Got it. And that's amazing advice because when you look at some of the problems that some people have when it comes to sometimes pairs not feeding chicks, the females not sitting on the eggs, a lot of the time it does come down to compatibility. And, pairing the way you are in a flock like situation really does allows for maximum compatibility. So I think that's awesome. So I
Oh,
did
one
want
thing
to
I
ask.
said, I don't
Sure. Mhm.
colony breed. If anyone thinks I know, I once the male picks his female, I separate them out in a separate cage. So everyone I breed is separate. Nobody's colony bred. I don't really believe in that because I already have the space for it. So I don't colony breed
Right.
my birds. I have an aviary that I pair up all my birds in, and it goes like that. So, yeah. So some
For
people might
sure.
do it, some people might not. But once the male picks his female, I separate him and her from the cage, and they're put separate.
Got it. And that makes perfect sense, especially when you're looking for to create specific mutations. The
Yes,
colony breeding situation
very
just gets a
smart.
little
Yes, yes,
hectic.
yes.
So that
And a lot
makes
of
sense.
inbreeding happens when a lot of breeders are not responsible and they don't take out chicks in time. The babies wean out, and they look
Mhm.
like the same size as an adult. The parents or the breeder thinks, oh, that's just another one of my breeding pairs. And next thing you know, the siblings are breeding with siblings, and you have inbred birds. So it's very important from where you pick your birds from, and also as a breeder, you got to be very responsible because at the end of the day, you're producing these birds, and your birds is basically your reputation. If you have crappy birds, your reputation is going to go downhill, and long term, you're not going to last. People are going to pick you apart, and it's just a lose-lose situation.
Absolutely. And reputation is everything. So I totally get that. Now, do you use any supplements with your birds, whether it's on the water or on the food?
So I have heard of people telling me to use it. Just recently, I got um man, I forgot what it's called. There's a supplement that
Is
I
it
have a picture.
Nectin?
No, 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 no.
No.
It's boy, I don't know what. Whatever. The point is, there was this formula that a friend of mine recommended. She was like, "Hey, if any of your cockatiels are not producing, put this on their chop, sprinkle it
Hmm.
on, and let them eat it." Thank God with my cockatiels or cockatiels in general, they're not hard to produce. You don't really have to use any kind of supplements to make them produce. They just naturally have it.
Hmm.
And another way I can tell if my pairs are good or not is on the back of my nest boxes, I have index cards attached
Okay.
on the back of the boxes. The index card is like a passport for the bird. Everywhere you travel, you get a stamp, right?
Right.
So it's the same thing. When the bird produces, I not stamp, but I write down how many babies they had, when they produced. So that way I know which pair at the end of the year did good, which pair did
Hmm.
mediocre, and which pair did not so good. That's very important because you also have to think about the bird's perspective. I like to make sure my birds don't produce more than 3 times a year. If you don't know what the heck your birds are doing, some pairs might produce 5, 6 times a year. If
Right.
you overbreed the birds, your females will not do good long term, where they're going to overbreed and they're not going to last long term, or they're not just overall forget about money or babies. Your birds are not going to be healthy, and last thing you want is unhealthy birds. So once they do 3 clutches, they're done. They're not producing, and you give everyone else a chance. But I'm very careful with that kind of stuff because I love my birds, and I would never want to overbreed the birds. And next thing you know, you have females dropping dead, and you have to replace or anything like that. Just that scenario, I would not want to deal with that.
Got it. Exactly. Well, definitely appreciate your time today. I think this conversation has been fantastic, and I look forward to future conversations. I think one
Thank you.
big thing that stuck out to me was just your dedication to the craft. You're a student of the game, and most importantly, your mindset reminds me of Tony Silva a little bit because he always used to say, listen to your birds; they will talk to you. And like
Yes.
you said, watch your birds. Look and see what they like and what they don't like. If your bird is plucking, what did you introduce to the environment that was new? There's so many questions we can ask our birds just by looking at them. And I think you're a living testament to that with the work you're doing with Cockatiels. So really great to have you on,
And
Shawn.
one last thing, I really appreciate you as well. And I'm going to say
Of
something
course.
as far as Mark's parents in a second.
Sure.
One thing I will say, right?
Hmm.
I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. One thing that might work for me might not work for you.
Right.
So you might take my advice, you might not. But my point is, do your own research. Just like Mark said, your bird might literally be talking to you right now and saying, "Hey, listen, owner, I don't feel comfortable with this," and you might be like, "What the heck? Like, what do I do? Do I bring it to the vet? Do I do this? Do you do that?" Something as simple as just sitting and watching the bird and saying, "Why is the bird acting like this?"
Right.
By the body language itself is the language between you and the bird. If you see the bird is huddled up in the corner, not moving, if you see that the bird is puffed up, where it's acting abnormal, if the crest on the cockatiel is down, where it's
Hmm.
just sitting there, or the tail is bobbing, or it's shivering, that is your verbal or body language saying, "Hey, listen, Shawn or Mark, I'm not feeling good," or "there's a problem." So you take
Right.
advantage of that. The bird is not going to act weird for no reason. And a lot of times when the bird is showing signs of illness, it's already too late, because in the
True.
wild, if the bird shows signs of illness, the predator will eat the bird or the prey.
Exactly. Yep.
So it fights for as much as it could until it can't fight anymore, where that thing, it's already in its last moments. And Tony Silva, like you said, also talked about that as well. I'm not sure
Hmm.
about this, but he definitely talked about it as far as diet. I had the chance to
Right.
meet the dude, very cool person, but um, as far as diet goes, try to implicate their diet from the wild as much as possible, because that's their
Hmm.
roots. That's where they originated from. So, um, if you can, that would be great.
Got
But
it. Yeah,
thank you so
definitely
much for having me.
appreciate that. And
I really, really appreciate you, Mark, as a whole. The stuff that you're doing is very, very impressive and very important in the aviculture world, because nowadays a lot
thank
of
you.
customers or people that are getting into this hobby, or a lot of people might not know what they're doing, and they might be afraid of, oh, people are going to pick me apart or be rude or be mean,
Right.
or they might make fun of me for not understanding, or they might not take me serious. But definitely, guys, take the risk, because I'm young, and if I can do it, I guarantee you guys can as well. So don't be afraid. Put your foot through the door, and you never know. Stuff that you never thought would be possible might even be better than what you expected. So definitely take the risk. And if it doesn't work, at least you gain the experience.
Absolutely. That's great advice. I love the message. And with all the people saying aviculture is dying in the US, this is the future of aviculture right here. Thanks, Shawn, for coming
This
on.
is just starting.